Digging Deeper listeners, we are back with another powerful episode. If you joined us last week, we talked about sexuality, following up our series teaching, and now another hot topic, a very powerful, important topic to talk about. We are talking about abortion. It was taught at our campuses this weekend, and now we have a few of the teachers and a special guest joining us here for this hour on Digging Deeper. To my left, you're familiar with him, Brian Lucas out of Murphy. Brian, how you doing?
Doing all right for being on a podcast about abortion.
Oh, right. Brian was like, hey, if somebody needs to take my spot, it's totally fine, but I value what you have to say. And Mark, are you going on 3 in a row here on Digging Deeper? Or
Yeah.
I'm going to start charging your rent.
Yeah.
Even though I'm the one asking you. So.
Yeah, this is quite a series. It's
Yes.
been a real challenge and a stretch, and I think the Lord's really using it in our church. I'm excited to have Robin here with us today.
And Robin Fuller to my far right. Many of you probably know who she is, but Robin, why do we have you on this podcast?
Well, after being a pregnancy center director of 3 separate pregnancy centers for more than 23 years, and now I'm a certified professional coach working with pregnancy center leaders all over the world, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, this is your passion. This is what you want to talk about. I was talking to Robin, and she said, I miss talking about abortion. And I was like, that is a sentence I never thought I would hear. But it's just because, you're so knowledgeable on the topic. And even as we were talking about it before we started recording, there is a vault of knowledge up there in your mind. And so we want to get to as much of it as we can.
Robin, what year did you start at the PCC in Grants Pass?
In Grants Pass, 2001,
Okay.
and I left in 2018.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I can remember. I know just personally being impacted by the way that you led that ministry, and I think really kind of raised an awareness that, you just kind of championed it in a way that I think we're not going to know till the other side of eternity how many lives you've impacted just through that work.
Well, thank you. It's through personal experience. Who is it that says, whatever you've gone through is what God will turn around and have you minister to? I think it's Perry Atkinson. He always says that. And, I experienced 2 different crisis pregnancies, one of them resulting in abortion and one resulting in, the birth of my oldest son. So when you live it, you kind of understand it. And I really am grateful for River Valley, first of all, for tackling this, because very few churches do.
Well, we love you guys, the Pregnancy Care Center. I know you're not officially on staff there anymore.
It's still doing great work.
Your legacy definitely continues, and John and his team are doing a great job over there, and we love the partnership. And I know we've shared a lot of ministry together, just in ways that it's been a privilege to help support, your ministry, and we feel like you've been a real partner for us as well.
Well, I was telling Tim, I don't know if you know this, little side note, River Valley was the very first donation ever for the Pregnancy Care Center when it was founded way back when.
Interesting.
So thank you.
Did not know that.
Now you do.
But cool, yeah. Again, you will always just kind of, and there's so many people doing good work at the Pregnancy Care Center, but I feel like you and the PCC will be synonymous for quite a long time. So, as we said, we have a lot of really good kind of things to dive into. But as kind of a staple on these podcasts as we follow these messages to you guys that taught, again, there's so much that you guys study, that you read about, but not all of it can make it to the pulpit. So what was the one thing that you wished you would have had more time to talk about?
I'll go first on that one. Yeah. One of the things that I don't even think it was just statistic that really surprised me. Usually in our prep, when it catches you off guard a little bit, it should be in there, and I don't know if it made it into my actual message, but really just the idea of how many women are pressured into this. And there was a study, I think in 2018, it was in the Journal of American Physicians and Surgeons, and they found that nearly 3/4 of women with a history of abortion admitted that they experienced at least some form of subtle pressure to go through with it. And so, kind of just this, there's this really kind of upside down thinking about abortion where it's this really empowering thing for women, but that the reality of it seems to be more often that it's really like the exact opposite of that it really is actually disempowering a lot of women.
That's a very good point. Yeah, and that kind of, when I think of, actually, no, I had a thought. I don't even know how to finish the sentence. I'll get back to it later, but thank you for sharing that. Mark,
Well, mine's kind of similar, coming at it a little differently. This whole idea of Christianity is often criticized as being, hostile to women, unloving, even like the war against women. And so I wanted to talk about that, did not have time, but knew we would be here. And then to have Robin here, I'm sure you have a lot to say about that particular criticism. I mean, obviously, we know that with the whole sexual revolution and abortion being, one of the consequences of that women have the most to lose. Women are the biggest losers on the whole thing, and so I think it's understandable for my phone's blowing up. I think it's understandable for women to want to push back, and for women to feel like I want to have some control over this thing because, I don't know that it's always been kind or nice to them or for them. So I get it, but a war against women, is that really what's going on?
Well, one of the things that I would say, I heard a quote just a couple weeks ago, evil men love abortion. And if you think about women who are being abused or women who are being trafficked, evil men love abortion because they'll just have their, women have them over and over and over and over, multiple abortions. And the pressures that you're talking about, it's not necessarily always from a person. It's those cultural pressures. The abortion I had was because I didn't want people to know I wasn't the perfect Christian girl, that I seemed to be on the outside. And so if they saw my pregnancy, right, it's the one sin you can't hide. You can't hide pregnancy, not for very long anyway. And so if people saw that, they would know I wasn't this good girl. That's the only reason I had my abortion when I really think about it. But it was pressure of a different kind that people don't think about. So it could be pressure of, I can't lose my school scholarship, or I just got a new job, and if I'm pregnant, I'm going to lose it. Or so the pressures they can be from people, but not always just people.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the way the church began in the first century, there was such great, not just abortion happening, but infanticide. And it was the girls, that were killed most often just because of that culture, and they, unfortunately, tragically, didn't have the same value as boys, and so it was Christianity that brought value to girls and women, and all of the babies that were, I talked about this a little bit in my message, but the babies that were saved, many were for slavery and for temple prostitution. And how it was the church that saved them. Jesus saved them through the church out of that and brought a value and a dignity and a worth to these women. The whole sexual ethic of the Bible was so loving and empowering to women because it was a culture where men had their mistresses, they had their sex slaves, and we have our wives to take care of the house stuff. And it was so... it was so evil, and so selfish. And it was Christianity that says, hey, you got one woman in your life, and she's your lover, she's your best friend, she's your wife, and in Paul in the New Testament, be committed to her. So, I mean, we can go on. And I was thinking maybe, Robin, you could talk about some of the things you see that happen in women who end up going down this path and who have abortions, because it seems like the opposite is true, that the culture that promotes abortion is actually cruel to women.
Well, and I would say every woman, when she finds out she's pregnant, she immediately thinks, I'm going to be a mom, right? I know even for me, the first time I got pregnant, I wanted to eat well. I wanted to take care of my body. I imagined what kind of a mom I'm going to be, and is it a boy? Is it a girl? You think all those questions. And so to have to turn all those off, The brain is so powerful to have to flip that off and kill your own child is really intense. And as I said earlier, I was talking to Tim, I have never met a woman who, once she got beyond the crisis, did not welcome her baby. Okay? So this is one of the reasons why adoption is, people are like, why doesn't she just, have the baby and place it for adoption? Well, because by the time she carries this precious child to term, she's bonded with it, and she wants to be a mom. She's beyond the crisis. So, I've met women before who didn't even remember they had abortions because it's so painful. And so what happens with a woman, there's a lot of stuff go on. That's why the Journey program and Forgiven and Set Free and these after abortion healing programs are so needed because it's different than abuse. Nobody did this to me. I made the decision to kill my own child, and that's a difficult thing to rectify and to reconcile with the Lord.
That stat, I want to repeat it because it blows my mind. I mean, with thousands of women that you've walked through who were wanting to possibly consider an abortion, and you were able to walk with them and they changed their mind, 0 of them on the other side of the pregnancy were like, I should have.
I should have had an abortion.
Yeah.
I have heard that not from anyone here locally, but I have heard other pregnancy center leaders talk about that they have had a few clients that have said, I wish I wouldn't have had this child. But that's typically because there's such intensive abuse or there's stuff going on where the child is in danger.
Moral of the story, though, it's either 0 or very, very, very small, the percentage of women who, and that is fascinating.
God has created men and women to want to be parents. I mean, procreate, right? That's what he said to Adam and Eve, So...
Well, and just the way it's wired into our biology too, right? And that was one thing that Ashley, my wife, said as we were talking about this topic, that there's kind of this false promise, right? Of if you have an abortion, it's like it never happened, but that biologically, like a woman's body is making all these changes and hormonal things and things where you don't just turn that off. Like there is a loss and kind of like even miscarriage. That. There is really it's not just
well, and you
gone.
remember it. It's amazing what of all the women I know who have gone through abortion healing, the things they remember. Like, I hate garlic. Well, as she realizes, the doctor who performed the abortion had garlic on his breath. Or women who would hear a vacuum cleaner in a store and would fall to the ground in a fetal position because it reminds her of the sound of the suction machine. My abortion was on my grandfather's birthday, I found out years later. So on his birthday, I aborted his 75th great-grandchild. So the things you remember, the impact and the consequences of that decision can carry throughout your entire life.
Wow.
Wow, and this is just the beginning of it. Robin, I want to stick with you, and you have mentioned that you've taught on this topic many times. So either from that perspective, or from sitting in a church listening to this topic, what would you hope is the main thing being taught on, or the one big takeaway, or the one big idea? As somebody that has been on both sides of this topic, what would you hope that a church is relaying in a teaching on abortion?
Well, part of it, and Psalm 139, it's either a life or it's not. There's no in between. And if God is the creator and the author of life, life is good. I've heard from our Catholic brothers and sisters, and I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but Father Bill locally taught on this, is every time a husband and wife has sexual relations, they invite God into the marriage bed. And they say, God, you're welcome here. And if this union results in a child, we trust you and life is good. So people look at Catholics like they have all these kids. Why are they having these kids? Are they stupid? No, it's because they value life. And there were years where the Protestant churches did not value life, and our Catholic brothers and sisters held up that mantle and fought for life. So if it truly is a life at conception and God has ordained that life, as Christians, we must do what we can to protect that life. And we must teach on it. And we must be filled with grace when the woman finds herself pregnant who is not in a good situation. Part of my story, which I don't think I really shared, my second pregnancy, I was married to another man. I was the head of a pregnancy center down in Sacramento, and Steve and I got pregnant. My current husband. So I was married to another man. I got pregnant with another man's baby, and I'm the head of a ministry. Okay, wrap your brain around that for just a second.
Right.
So I went to the board meeting that December of 1990, and I offered to resign. The board of that pregnancy center said, the reason we exist is because of you and people like you in your situation. We are never going to turn our back on you. And yes, you can stay in the position, and we're going to support you. Steve and I finally got my divorce final, and we got married 6 days before our oldest son was born, and that's 31 years ago. They gave grace to me in a situation where it didn't look like it was deserved, and our churches, in my mind, have not done a good job of preaching that kind of grace and welcome. When you blow it, we are right here to support you. We are right here. And so there's a reason why over 70% of women who have abortions, according to Planned Parenthood statistics, believe in God and go to church. 70%. Part of it's because they don't feel like they're welcome to go to their church and get the support that they might need.
Wow. And I know, I haven't listened to your guys' teachings. I know at Rogue River, though, Grace, I mean, I think we've just been encouraging each other as through this whole series that Grace is leading the charge with that. And so, yeah, I have no doubt in my mind that out at Redwood with Andy and you guys that Grace was just covering these teachings. And that's, so important with all these series. And like, I think there's some people that think there's like the church, and then there's those that are broken outside the church. And it's like,
no, there's actually a program called Embrace Grace. You should look into it. It's actually a program you can have inside of your church for women who find themselves unexpectedly pregnant. It's growing nationwide, and might be a program you guys want to have here at River Valley.
I have just a quick question, Tim, if I may.
Please.
Because sometimes when we talk about grace, and I think we should be as heavy grace as possible, the pushback is, well, where's the role of repentance? I think about even like your story, or like talking about being a church that's, in fact, that's one of the questions I was asked. It's like, well, what responsibility does a person have to repent for something like this?
Yeah, no, that was, well, for me, it was huge. I was very repentant. I was mortified, and abortion was not an option that time. And so I was willing to do whatever it took to not have the abortion. But it was actually that pregnancy that got me all in with the Lord. That was my really final decision that said, from this day on, I'm going to live 100% for you. So you can tell if someone is repentant or not, in that situation. I mean, grace needs to be given,
Yes.
but my situation is not common. I've never heard of another pregnancy center director in that situation. Actually, I have. I've heard of 2 of them, and they were both fired.
wow.
And those pregnancy center leaders who got pregnant were repentant, and they were still fired. So there's this thing, this moral code that tends to be in Protestant circles, not as much in the Catholic circles. That board was half Catholic when I mentioned that. And I think it was the Catholic brothers and sisters who were like, why wouldn't we support her? There's a baby there. We need to give her support. But it was the Protestants who had the moral code. The first pregnancy, I got kicked out of Oral Roberts University for being pregnant, and then had the abortion. So Christian colleges still do that today, most of them.
Yeah, really interesting part of the story there. I think too. I mean, obviously we want to be grace and truth, but it's always worth the gamble, right? Like, somebody makes a mistake, and do we err on the side of grace? And even just thinking of your story, right? What if that board had decided to fire you, and you probably wouldn't have come here?
I wouldn't have been at the pregnancy care
Right.
center.
So even just thinking selfishly of like, grants pass, and our area and all the lives that you've touched, like, wouldn't have happened.
You know the really cool part of the story? It's that Sacramento Life Center. It's their 50-year anniversary this year. I got to go down and record a video that will be shown at their gala in November, and I get to publicly thank the organization and those board members for giving me grace all those years ago.
Man.
I'm excited for that.
But to sum up what you were saying, Mark, grace and repentance work really well together, and,
Sure.
and definitely both need to be in a situation where we're going to see true healing, and that's always good to reiterate, especially through this series, as we always want to lay on the grace, but we're not for 1 second forgetting the importance of conviction and repentance and truth. So,
Well, and walking through, just one more thing,
Yeah.
walking through that pregnancy, there was a lot of judgment towards me. How would there not be, for those who knew? And it was like God took my little face in his hands and said, as long as you and I are good, we're good. And the only pastor we could find to marry us was an Episcopal priest who had been on the board of Planned Parenthood. He gave us grace and allowed us to get married in his church, where others would not.
wow, that's powerful.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Grace, grace, grace.
Grace, grace,
Radical grace.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you kind of kicked us off, but for honestly, for the rest of the podcast, we want to address some questions that were either emailed to us or someone pulled you aside after, as you said, and hey, well, what about this? And so we actually got one emailed, and it was a kind of a reminder or wanting us to talk about the role of men in abortions. And I actually had somebody else kind of talk about it, and there was a lot of different directions, kind of like, what does whether it's the repentance of a man in the situation or the forgiveness of a man in the situation. I forget the exact.
Well, yeah, because I had a guy come to me after one of the services, and basically that was his question. It's like, and he's not currently married, but he was talking about his ex-wife who had 2 abortions, basically against his desires, and so it was just a reminder that there's that side of the story, that there are men that have been severely hurt. Now I don't claim to say that that's more common than men that pressure women to have an abortion. You probably maybe have more, at least anecdotal evidence of it being stronger on the men. So that's the other side of it. Men who are very pushy, persuasive, demanding that their girlfriend or wife get an abortion. And so, that would include, or that would involve, repentance, and dealing with that role that they had in it, which is like the journey and forgiven and set free, which is for a class for men as well, which we mentioned here on the services. So those are a couple things come to my mind as far as the impact. So we're talking really the impact on men, and then the role that men play in the whole abortion process as well.
Yeah.
We can talk about sexual purity. That's another conversation. And these things do result from something.
Right.
So there are other issues about being responsible for our actions.
Right. Yeah, I think the main plea, as you had said from the email, was like, don't forget there's another party in this as well. As we're talking about women that have to go through healing or even showing grace to women, we can't forget that men are involved in that as well. Right. I don't know if you had any thoughts before I wanted
It
to hear.
took 2 to get pregnant.
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, a couple things. I think that study that I cited earlier, I think it was something like 30% of the women who'd said they had pressure, it was literally like their partner was going to leave them if they didn't get the abortion, which is, obviously the guy's just as guilty, if not more so, in that point. And then one of the other things, seeing that question when you sent it, sometimes we, as Christians, we get the charge like, oh, you're just trying to let the guy off the hook. Like the women have to bear the responsibility of this if you outlaw abortion. And I think people are surprised how many believers, when somebody says something about, oh, well, child support should start when the baby's in the womb. Yeah, okay, like we'll sign on for that. And some of those things that I think we I think we should put the guy on the hook in that way, even financially responsible, like we do. I don't know.
Robin, do you have any thoughts towards that?
I just know that I've seen a certain, percentage of men who were just devastated. So to say that this life created in the womb is only hers, or only his, that child, even in the most difficult of circumstances. I know people who were born as a result of rape. To say that this woman who went through such a tragic thing, now she needs to go through another devastating thing on top of it, where so many children who have been born as a result of rape are amazing people. And I can't imagine the world without them. And even these women, as I said, once they're beyond the crisis and the child is born, even a woman who has been raped, when this baby is born and put in her arms, and it looks, it's half her, right? That it can be such a beautiful healing thing out of such a devastating. But what's amazing is how people will focus on the hard things. But that baby, when it's born, the dad is responsible to pay for that child till it's 18. But in the womb, he has no rights at all. It's baffling to me.
I do want to pause real quick. So a word I've heard you use a few times, and I just maybe to expand on it to make it clear to the listeners, you've referred to the crisis. And it sounds like that's probably something that's addressed a lot in your field of work. So when you're responding to the crisis, you get beyond the crisis, what specifically would you say you're talking about?
Well, the crisis could be my parents are going to kick me out of the house if I have this baby.
So or the elephant in the room that is causing the tension.
What is leading her to say she needs to have this abortion? Did she just get a scholarship at school? And if she's pregnant, she's going to lose the scholarship. Are her parents really going to kick her out? So once she gets beyond that crisis and she makes the decision to continue the pregnancy, all of a sudden the crisis is not there anymore, right? I still can go to school and get my degree. My parents actually didn't kick me out, or even if they did, I found a great place to live. I mean, so it's the crisis.
The end of the world thing, the pressure that is on their shoulders.
That says I have to have this abortion now.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that, and I probably could have drawn to the same conclusion, but it was good to hear you say that. So, okay, moving forward, Mark, did you hear any other questions?
Yeah, I did. How about are aborted babies in heaven? I got that question a few times.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
So
I only say that from my own experience.
Well, yeah. Well, the Bible doesn't speak directly to it, although there's a reference in 2 Samuel where David says when he lost their baby with Bathsheba, that I will go to see him. So there was that confidence that David had that baby was with the Lord. And anything you have on that, Brian, as far as?
No, I wouldn't add anything to that.
Yeah.
I think the couch handled the question pretty well there.
Well, then you just have the nature of sin. Obviously, babies are born conceived with a sin nature, but not necessarily willful sinners. And so how could you have a judgment if you don't really, you're not at a place where you have actually willfully rejected or sinned against God? That would be another issue we could look at.
Does a 1-year-old go to heaven?
Yeah, I mean, then there's the age of accountability, which is, again, there's no Bible verse. There's a scripture in Isaiah. I can't remember exactly where, talking about the ability to know right from wrong, and God understands that in the individual, and so that's where kind of the age of accountability has come into play. So up until then, whenever then is, there would be that, I guess you call it a dispensation of grace, and then you could say that those who die before then are elect, I suppose, would be another way of saying it theologically. But yeah, we all sure want to believe that that's the case, and we have no reason not to believe.
Right. I was going to say, yeah. Why wouldn't?
Character of God, you know.
Yeah, well, like Brian said, the couch took care of that one. And
Yeah.
another one I think you talked about, which this one also might go to the couch, but I want to open it up to everybody, the difference between birth control and abortion.
Contraception, is it abortion? And what contraception are we, maybe we need to take more seriously because it prevents versus it actually eliminates the pregnancy?
Yeah, and that's something that most Protestants don't talk about is if we believe that life begins at conception, there are different kinds of birth control methods. There are those that actually are barrier methods. They prevent the sperm from ever getting to the egg. But many of the birth control methods out there, some of the most common ones, do not prevent the sperm from reaching the egg. It just creates a hostile environment in the womb. So the little embryo, as it travels down the fallopian tubes, giving you a little biology lesson,
Yeah,
10 to 14 days after conception, it can't implant in the womb. So it's something that I wish was talked more about. Either it's a life or it's not. And even the medical textbooks changed the definition of pregnancy to implantation in the womb at some point. And so either life begins at conception. Some now say it begins at implantation. So this little fertilized embryo is nothing. Well, as Christians, we believe life begins at conception. At least I do. Conception to natural death. That's the way a life should be.
For our listeners, just to be very simple, then what forms of birth control then, in your mind at least, are more problematic versus the ones that definitely prevent the conception?
It would be the IUD. There's an IUD that has no hormones at all. So all it is a hostile environment in the womb. Some of the low-dose birth control pills, even they say in all the packaging that it may not prevent conception. So it's just really important to talk to your doctor and really understand. I know when I started learning all of this many years ago, I switched to a different method with my husband because I didn't want to run the risk of aborting any of my own children. So it's a difficult topic. It's one to talk about. But yeah.
So with that, the right question to ask, and I don't know how many younger listeners we have, but I mean, even if this is just information we can share, the right questions to ask the doctor would be, what would you say if you're looking to ask information? Because if you say, you could ask them, hey, is this technically, an abortion, based on their understanding of when life starts, their answer might be...
They'll usually say no.
Yeah.
No, the risk is really low. Well, even if the risk is really low, is that a risk that you and your husband want to take that you might... It's sticky. It's sticky. Barrier methods are usually pretty good.
So I guess that would be, is this a barrier method versus...
Barrier method prevents a sperm from ever reaching an egg, and so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you guys, or pregnancy care centers, is that information or counseling? Do you ever have people call with questions about birth
Not
control
very
questions?
often. Our culture, especially in America, just thinks, like I said, our Catholic brothers and sisters welcome children. Welcome children. And I remember hearing a Focus on the Family episode years ago, and they had 3 children, and they had a oops pregnancy, right? And God stopped the dad and said, why are you disappointed? Why do you have a birth control mentality when I am the author and the creator of life? You should not be disappointed your wife is pregnant. This is a gift and a blessing from me. But we think we can birth control our way, and we're the ones that are the authors and creators of life. That's kind of what the birth control mentality has done. Instead of welcoming life, we are going to control it. If we can't control it through birth control, we're going to control it through abortion. So that mentality travels through to abortion. It's one of the reasons why it's more accepted in our society.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You didn't expect that answer, did you?
It's taking a second for us to process all this information.
I'm stumping them.
Which is why we wanted you on the podcast for sure. Mark, did you have any other questions? I got one more that I kind of specifically want to ask Robin. This is just kind of an Ask Robin time, but I think all of us can speak into it, unless you had any more.
Well, I mean, I did address this, but I think it's actually kind of a light bulb for me recently in how the life issue with virtually all bioethicists is agreed that it's at conception, that's already kind of like the science has settled that. And so the argument has really been already lost in terms of, well, we can't fight for life starting some other time later. It's at conception. I mean, all the DNA, everything's intact. It's all good to go. It's just going to take a developmental process, and so there's not necessarily any. It's a human being. Well, then, why isn't that settling the argument? And so I spent some time, and I really credit Nancy Pearcy in her book "Love Thy Body," and how she shows this distinction that our culture has between personhood and being a human being. And so and she talks about how it's it really explains assisted suicide, explains the hookup culture, free sex, it explains homosexuality, explains the transgender movement, that really I am not my body. Matter doesn't matter. It's detached from me, and so that same argument, of course, has a little different face in all those examples that she gives, but with abortion, it's okay, life at conception, but the personhood comes later, which is an illogical conversation because no one has any consensus as to when that personhood
it's a
begins.
life, but the woman's life is more important, so the woman's life supersedes the baby's life, so thus abortion is okay.
Right, exactly. So that's a question. I think some people, as they're studying this, and like, wait a minute, it seems like the life issue's resolved. It's a conception. How come they're still performing abortions? Well, it's the whole personhood distinction.
Well, even Peter Singer, who's a bioethicist from Yale, says abortion should be retroactive.
Right,
After the
infanticide,
child is born, maybe even up to 2 years, because the baby can't really...
Like a buyer's remorse, right?
Yeah.
Give people time
absolutely. And he says it to standing ovations.
Yeah.
Well, because at least he's being consistent, right?
Intellectually
so
honest.
It's the same argument.
Yeah.
The same. If you follow that, and that was
Yes.
one thing I shared was, if you're talking with a friend who's maybe pro-choice, I mean, that's one of the things that you need to ask them. Where does it stop? Does it stop with a 2-year-old? Does it stop with someone who's in a coma? Does it stop with an elderly person that has cognitively lost who they are?
That's why I say I'm pro-life from conception to natural death. That's the way I explain how I believe.
Yeah.
I like that. That's gonna lead me to another question here in a minute, but I do one question I wanted to kind of ask, and one I wanted to talk about real quick. Not necessarily get because this could turn into just sharing opinions maybe, but obviously Supreme Court decision Roe v. Wade is on the doorstep, and it's going to be announced here pretty soon. The leak happened and everything. But from your perspective, Rob, and I kind of wanted to maybe hear your 2 cents on what this looks like, I guess, for all of us, but for us as a church. And when I asked you right before, again, your response kind of shocked me. Not to set the stage for a shocking response, but it was pretty interesting. And your first thing was like, I don't know if we're prepared. So if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that here for a minute or two, and what does the Supreme Court decision, what does it have in store for us as a church?
Well, as I said earlier, evil men love abortion. I would say evil people love abortion. There is a group of people who really want abortion, and I don't think we're prepared for the fury that might be unleashed. There are already pregnancy centers being bombed and graffitied around the nation. There's at least one group I know of that says they want to have a day of unleashing fury against anyone who is pro-life, any churches who are pro-life, any pregnancy centers, and I just don't think we're ready for the possible fury and the results. It does not mean that abortion will become illegal nationwide. There will be states that will ban it. But the other piece that it's going to do is it's going to push even more women to chemical abortion. So now the FDA says you can just receive these pills in the mail. you take them yourself, you abort your own baby in your toilet, and it's going to push more and more women towards that. And I'm not sure what the healing process is going to look like for more of those women. And as already over 62% of abortions are through chemical abortion. So it's not going to stop abortion. They are going to find ways to keep it going.
So a state like Oklahoma, which I'm assuming when Roe v. Wade is officially overturned, Oklahoma will be an anti-abortion state, I would assume.
Yes, but they can't. They're saying that they have laws that you can't receive these pills in the mail.
Yeah.
But tell me, how are you going to
police that?
legislate or police
Yeah.
a woman receiving these pills in the mail, and she
Yeah.
can get them from anywhere? It's
Interesting.
When you're hearing about these companies that are going to finance their employees crossing state lines to take care of stuff.
oh
so,
yeah, Oregon, New York, California.
So what I'm hearing is that while you can celebrate the victory that some states are going to ban it, what you're saying is that there is just going to be, there's going to be more to deal with. As a church who's wanting to love our community, there's going to be even different things that we're going to have to figure out how to walk with and understand.
Yeah.
And
Well, and greater. Think of that woman who lives in Oklahoma who is facing a terrible situation, and she now doesn't have any place to turn easily. What is she going to do? What is she going to turn to? What kind of greater evil might she turn to? I'm pro-life all the way through, but I'm just not sure what the repercussions would be.
Can I ask just your opinion too? When you talk about the people who love abortion, right? And just that kind of even brought to mind when New York passed their, they amended their constitution, their state constitution, to guarantee it, and they had this big celebration and lit up the Empire State Building.
Shout your abortion.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a relatively small amount of people, though, that even the majority of people who would consider themselves pro-choice are kind of uneasy about it?
I think for a lot of the younger generation, they want something to grab onto. And if this is something they can grab onto, a movement, I think it might just suck a lot of them in.
Interesting. I read some research that is encouraging with young people, and it's probably one of those things where they're going to go both directions, like the rest of culture does. But it's that younger generation, the numbers are going down in their views.
They are the most pro-life generation ever, which is good.
Yeah, and one reason that we think that's the case is just because they have a much higher passion for justice, for social justice.
Well, and they've grown up with ultrasound. Of course it's a baby.
There you
How
go.
could you say it's not a baby?
Right, exactly. So I thought that was encouraging at least.
I think it might be more
Yeah.
polarizing. I think that's one of my concerns if Roe is overturned, that it may just become more polarizing. And I think the role of the church is really going to be to preach the truth, what is truth, and to empower those youth to, be pro-life. It's good. Be in support of the unborn child. And like I said, either it's a life or it's not. There's no in between.
Right. Yeah, it's about to get crazy, for sure.
Well, Jesus is going to be coming back.
yeah, no, definitely. All right. Well, the only other things I wanted to talk about, and whether these are questions or just topics, and I think they can kind of be grouped together as we look to end our time. While our church staff was talking about this, and even in homes and stuff, this idea that some people are pro-life and some people are just pro-birth. That maybe there's a lot of sensitivity towards fighting abortions, but not concerned with the rest of life. And I don't know if you guys wanted to speak to that, or if you've seen that, or if I'm wrong in saying that, or if you've seen that played out at all.
Oh, I just listened to a big podcast about it. I can't remember who it was through. It might have been Sean McDowell and his podcast, but yeah, the pro-life versus pro-birth, and you just want the baby born, and then you don't have anything to do with it. Well, oh my goodness, look at any pregnancy center I know, and the support that they give all the way through pregnancy and afterwards, and we'll help you find housing, and we'll help you get clean, and we'll help help. So it's just such a false, talking point that's real big right now.
Okay.
You're not
So-
pro-life, you're just pro-birth.
Okay.
You would know more than anybody the health of the pregnancy care center movement throughout the country, and I'm assuming that it's growing and it's strong, and it exists for one reason why I would think is the church is supporting those ministries. So is that an accurate statement that it's a growing movement in America, that the pregnancy care center movement is strong and well funded?
It is strong. It's never as funded as it could be.
Sure.
Some of the things that really are needed, yes, we do need more child care. Yes, we do need maternity homes. Some of these women really need a place to stay, but they need a place to stay where they can stay long enough to get the education they need, to get a good job. But yeah, I work with pregnancy center leaders all over the nation now, and helping them be on a solid foundation. If you have a strong leader, thus goes the organization, right? And so there are a lot of amazing pregnancy centers in the country that are doing really good work. And the whole pro-birth thing, when I first heard that, I thought, what? These people have no idea what pregnancy centers are doing around the nation, and the hundreds of thousands of people that are being helped through their ministries.
So it's a cheap shot, really,
Yeah.
to say that about the church.
It's a talking point that is,
Yeah.
oh, you're just pro-birth.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt, we all have to look in the mirror and ask the question: am I just pro-life, or am I whole life? Which would be a different way of saying, what was the word you used? Pro-life, pro-birth, pro-life. A different way of saying it is pro-life. Whole life, right. I'm about as much as I possibly can to meet people's needs, children, moms, people that have gone through it.
Yeah, it's a good.
But that's what you guys do.
And and even like the whole pro-birth thing. One of the reasons they say it is, well, you just want the baby to be born, and then it's going to be abused, and blah blah blah. Well, what people don't know, look at the statistics. They said when abortion was legalized, abuse would go down. Abuse has skyrocketed, and abortion is the ultimate abuse. So we've cheapened life. I mean, I'm pro-birth. I'm glad you were born. I'm glad you were born. I'm glad you were born. I mean, it's just really a really interesting rhetoric that's just new in the last couple of years, I think.
It is a good reminder, though, that if I am passionate against abortion, is that same passion throughout the whole facet of life, of anyone's life, is it being shown as well.
Yeah.
So,
I do think there's a difference, and I experienced it just personally in my teaching this last weekend. And I felt like it was sort of a passage the Lord has done in me, where in previous messages on this topic and conversations, I was much more focused on the truth, the right and wrong of it, countering those like terrible worldview and convictions and different things, and none of that's really changed. For me, the difference is trying to put myself in the situation of that terrified woman in that situation, and trying to make that the crisis that you talked about. And not that changes my views on it or what Jesus says, but like as a starting point to try to go from there to a good decision, and then caring for the child afterwards.
Sometimes all a young mom needs to hear is, do you know what? You'll be a great mom.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's all she needs to hear. Is she's had people tell her, oh, well, you've done horrible things and you'll be a bad mom. All she needs is one person to say, you know what? You'll be a great mom.
Right. So I guess that's just an example for, by God's grace, some growth in me in the conversation to try to be truly more concerned about her, not just the life in her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
That's very good. Well, due to time, I had kind of one more question, but I think it was something that we had kind of got addressed throughout, so I think we're okay to bypass it. But I do want to hear resources, whether it's podcasts, whether you did mention, I think for the second week in a row, Love Thy Body.
Yeah.
That's going on again.
Second week in a row.
Yep, I have that book.
All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, other resources that you would encourage our listeners to, if they're more interested on this topic, whether it's pro-life, pro-choice, abortion, well, whatever it may be.
There's. Go to somebody else first. Let me think about the best ones.
I'll do a slow turn to Brian then.
Well, I'll give you. I'll give you our local pregnancy care center. I know the people who are involved with that, even just on the board, like Allie Berg, Beth Pilcher, Chuck Costernut. It's like those people.
Yeah.
If you ever have a question, ask somebody who's involved with their local pregnancy care center, and they'll give you 10 things. One thing that I found that was kind of helpful, I hadn't visited before, was there was an article called The 5-Minute Pro-Lifer, and it's a website called the prolifetraining.com. And I'm not sure. Hopefully, they're not like a really fringe group.
I don't know.
But it was. It was very. They really were. The article that I read that they put out just did a really good job of trying to like simplify and just, here's, if you can give me 5 minutes to read this, then it'll help make some sense of things. So.
All right. And listeners, we are trying to do a better job of getting these. If you're a part of our e-newsletter, nice plug for that. Have these links or even just the names attached to them. So I have those written down.
Well, I'm not as involved in, directly. I used to know all the resources right off the top of my head. A couple different ones. Live Action is a website with Lila Rose. She's done a lot, kind of right on the cutting edge of what's going on nationwide in the world of pro-life.
What was her name again?
Lila Rose. She's the one who went undercover into Planned Parenthoods years ago and really helped expose a lot of the things that they were doing. So that's one really good resource.
All right. Mark, anything else?
I'll just stick with the Love Thy Body.
All right.
It's a good one.
Cool. I'm trying to figure out if it's going to work for next week's podcast too. If we can throw that.
There's even an oldie but goodie by Randy Alcorn called "Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Arguments." It was like the Bible of the pregnancy center when I worked there, and it's got. If you want to know how to talk with someone who really is pro-abortion, I don't say pro-choice. I do say pro-abortion because what is the choice? So, but pro-life answers to pro-choice arguments.
Okay.
And obviously focus on the family or like the Colson Center. Those are places to get short articles or podcasts on a number of the different talking points. So.
Well, guys, thank you very much. Glad to have you guys. Robin, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yes. Just glad that we're talking about it. So, listeners, stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed this week. We have those resources for you. Next week, we will be looking at social justice. Just another really important topic. So we're excited for that. Until then, see you next week.